Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And welcome to another episode in the series Dawah Ilallah. And now we are talking about putting some of the flesh onto the bones that we have created. We've gone through the last few weeks about what is required from you as a da'ih, the do's and the don'ts, the characteristics, what is permissible, what's not permissible. We are following what is acceptable in Islam. So we are not bringing in our own ideas. But however, at this point, we're looking at what would be effective ways of doing dawah. So this is not to be found in the pages of the Quran. It's not to be found in the Hadith. But we can see some of the things like one-on-one dawah was done. We said that maybe group dawah was done. But there are some things like we're now talking about internet and things like that. Those weren't around in the day. But they did communicate in a similar way with groups of people coming, big groups of people. I'm sure if the internet was around that time, it would have been used. Can't say for sure, Allah and His Messenger know best. But we said that when we use the internet, we have to be very, very cautious. The last time we were together, we spoke about how publications are very important, how we need to make sure that the cover and the back cover are done correctly. We don't need to tell everybody how great you are. They already read the book, they know how great you are. You can put that on the inside the book. You don't need to put that on the covers. So the covers should be striking, grab attention. And then the back page should be other people talking about how good the book is, or this magazine is, or this publication is. Preferably non-Muslims, well-known non-Muslims. Because well-known non-Muslims gives credibility to the publication. Because that's what it's for. It's a dawah publication. It's not a news about the mosque. It's not news about what's happening in your organization. It's a tool to bring people to submit to Allah. Therefore, you want as many other people talking about it from an external point of view as possible. Reach as many people as possible. Be careful when you're writing these publications that everything is in English or German or French, but not in Arabic. Why? It's a dawah publication. Unless it's a dawah publication for Muslims, and you're trying to call Muslims to Islam, and you're calling them to the deen of Islam, those ones who are not practicing, that's different. Then you can have it. Then it has to be targeted totally differently. But if you're aiming at calling to the non-Muslim or someone who's never heard about Islam, no Arabic, what's the point? They don't understand anyway. So make sure every term that you use is in English or in the language that you're going to write it in explained. So you don't have Alhamdulillah, Bismillah, Inshallah. That means nothing. You could be cursing the person. And I've had a lot of people actually asking me when I've done mosque tours in the old days, when I used to take earlier days when I did mosque tours, and they used to say, Inshallah, we'll do this. And the one woman came out to me and said, are you cursing us in Arabic? I said, no, exact opposite. He said, why do you keep using these words? See, now they don't know. They think we're putting spells on them or something. You know, so rather use, when you're working with non-Muslims, just use the language that you are writing it in. Don't use terms. If you wanted to, and it's permissible for you to do this, I think it's sometimes quite a good thing to do. If you're going to quote something from the Quran or from the Hadith or whatever in your publication, and there are certain terms we don't understand in English, or not very accurately, you can put the transliteration of the word in Arabic, and then explain this is an Arabic word which could mean, but you have to specify that. You have to be specific on what you're saying when you say that. So they don't know there's not like an incantation again and then there's some other words that mean something else. You have to think, how will he or she see this? How will they perceive this? How will they know this? Don't just send a publication out without it being proofread by different scholars. So don't just go to the guys that already agree with you. Try to send it to those who don't normally agree with you as well. Because you want the criticism and you want the praise. The criticism is probably better than the praise. Because the praise, they're just agreeing, they're just saying, yes, yes, good idea, good idea. There's a friend of mine in South Africa, he's a Mulana in South Africa, his name is Mulana Rafiq. He has a publication that he brings out every month. It's called M-O-R-E, more. You want more of it every year, every day, every month. It's Moments of Reflection. That's what it's called. It's a dawah publication. So it's just M-O-R-E, Moments of Reflection. But it's very nice, and it's a very simple thing. And he sends it out in the form of an email as well. So you get it every week, smaller version. So you don't have to have a big multi-million rand, multi-million dollar corporation to do this. Even if you've got nothing, you can do an online one. So publications, very, very important, but there must be thought behind them. It must be dawah sensitive. So you're calling to something. What are you calling to? That also has to be very clear. You can't call it Dawah Ilallah, and then after publication 6, it's got nothing to do with Dawah Ilallah anymore. Now you're starting to talk about all sorts of other things, and comparative religion and all sorts of things. If it's a publication to do with calling people to submit to Allah, it remains that for the next 5,000 years if it stays in existence. You can't change midstream because then you lose the impact of that publication. So you think there's not enough to talk about Allah for that long? There is plenty. So if you do a decent job of explaining everything properly, publication will go on forever, inshallah. Okay, what is the other form of dawah? So we talked about publication, we talked about one-on-one, we talked about internet, social medias, and we talked about making sure you have conversations people can overhear when you're talking about Islam. And then we spoke about also leaving strategically placed publications. So where people, maybe doctors' rooms, airports, hospitals, things like that, where people come in there at the waiting room, instead of reading nonsense magazines, there's a nice one of your magazines with a nice cover that they'll pick it up and read. Okay, your question?
One form of dawah that I've seen is through public lectures, and we make a very specific effort to invite popular non-Muslims as guests, as VIP guests, and we make sure that they get 5-star treatment. So we give them a lecture on Islam and, the benefits of being a Muslim and following Islam correctly, and we also make sure that they get, as I said, 5-star treatment. So they leave the lecture at the end of the day with a very good impression of Islam, and then we hope one thing leads to another.
Okay. So that's another way of doing dawah that has been suggested, is that public lectures. Public lectures are very, very useful tools for doing dawah. Again, you have to be sure that this is a dawah effort and not a comparative religion effort. There is a difference between a comparative lecture and a dawah lecture. A dawah lecture is calling to the basics of submission to Allah. You're calling people, your whole purpose is, did you know that almost 2 billion people in the world submit to one God? Or something like that. So it's not about debating, is Jesus God or not? That's not dawah. That is separate. That's a separate issue. Even though it's part of dawah, it's not this dawah that we are talking about. We are talking about dawah ilallah, calling people to submit to Allah. So having a public lecture is brilliant. This is 90% of the lectures I do are this way of doing work. I do public lectures at universities, colleges, schools, technicons, universities, wherever they might be, where there's groups of people like this that are not Muslims, and then we give them a lecture on what is Islam, as we'll be teaching you, inshallah, in the series, how to do one of those lectures. So how do you call people to submit to Allah? How do you do it in university, colleges, and so on? Very, very effective. But you've taken it a little bit further and said, if you do it like that, invite VIPs. So perhaps you invite the dean of the university or the headmaster or whatever it might be, or you invite people outside. The problem with having a dawah effort like that, say you have a dawah effort at the university or college and you bring somebody from outside the university or college, it's not ethical to do it that way. Because it belongs to the university, you've just got rights from the university to do it. You shouldn't be bringing anyone else outside of the university, or related, or sponsors, or supporters, or family members of the university to those meetings. It's just respect to the institutions. However, if you do it in a town hall or a city hall, and you do it, then you can invite any VIPs you want because you're not restricted by the policies. So even though the university would not mind if you did that, it's just not good manners to do it. It's much better to support the policies and the rules and without even having to be given them. So in the same way, if you're going to do it in the hospital or the military or the police or jails or prisons, you have to follow certain policies. Same way we have unwritten policies that we should have in our back of our mind when we do things like that as da'is, so that we can have future doors open again when we want to come back to those institutions. I remember when I was in the States, I spoke at 18 universities in 30 days. And all those universities have asked me to come back again. But because we respected their policies, we didn't bring, even though they never gave us any, we didn't bring any other people in. We didn't bring outsiders in. We only allowed their people from their university, from their town, that they had allowed to come in there. And they're all mostly non-Muslims. So you have to be careful, be sensitive to things like that. So when you're talking about a city hall, or it's going to be a town hall or perhaps even your office or whatever, then you can invite VIPs, you can get them 10-star luxury, whatever you want, you can give them caviar, whatever you want to do. That's fine. But then again, you must be sure that you are going to be calling to Allah with them, because they are coming, the first impression of Islam. What is the only thing you want them to know about? Their Creator. So you're not interested in telling them on Hajj and fasting in the month of Ramadan and all this type of stuff and health regulations and all these type of things. That's for a different type of lecture. It's not for a dawah thing. Like, one of the ways that we get into a lot of the Christian communities is we put up a big advert in the streets in the city, and we say, are you interested in working in an Arab country? Thinking about working in oil, like things like that. And then we give a series of lectures of what would be required. So we have someone from the embassy coming and saying, this is the requirements that you'll have to have. Somebody coming from one of the Arab countries and talking. But at the same time, we have an opportunity to do dawah. But it's not dawah ilallah. You see, separate, it's a back road dawah. So we can't use that as say, oh, this is dawah ilallah. What we're talking about in this area is dawah ilallah. So there are many ways of doing dawah, like having that type of thing, where the main aim is to spread the message of Islam to them. But it's not dawah ilallah. Understand? This has to be understood. So that's the next valid point that can be done. The next mark can move over there, to behind you. Okay. And we have another brother who is going to give us a suggestion on how to do dawah successfully.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran that He created the death and the life for the purpose of testing us.
Taqwa and truthfulness, humility and repentance, kindness and gratefulness.
Are you prepared for the final exam? Are you ready?
Generosity and tenderness give true value to life.
To answer the most important exam that you will ever face.
Dr. Jonathan Cazales.
Live your life on purpose.
Learn to utilize every moment of life to make it meaningful and precious in Live Your Life on Purpose. Every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 11:30 a.m. UK on Peace TV. Marriage or divorce?
What's Islamic ruling?
Nikah.
Solution or problem? Heaven or hell?
There is a misconception.
You choose. Beauty, wealth, family status, virtue. Decide what you want. Decide your choice. Be sad or be happy. It's your choice. Join Dr. Zakir Naik in Better Half or Bitter Half every Friday at 6:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 9:30 a.m. UK on Peace TV.
What we're talking about in this area is dawah ilallah. So there are many ways of doing dawah, like having that type of thing, where the main aim is to spread the message of Islam to them. But it's not dawah ilallah. Understand? This has to be understood. So that's the next valid point that can be done. The next mark can move over there, to behind you. Okay. And we have another brother who is going to give us a suggestion on how to do dawah successfully.
I notice there are many taxi drivers, like in New York, who are a lot of Muslims. So if they play, like when they get the visitors, travelers, tourists, they can play a DVD, a CD, translation of the Quran in English or whatever the language people who travel with them can understand. Yeah. So it's a kind of dawah also, I think. I don't know.
Jazakallah khair. The idea was raised that perhaps like taxi drivers in the UK, in other countries in the world where you have a lot of Muslim drivers, they could play the Quran or whatever. Generally, it will be against the policy of those companies to allow them to play any Islamic literature or any religious literature, let alone even Christians wouldn't be permitted to play Christian literature, because they would find that offensive to their Jewish community or atheist community, whatever, they'd use their taxis as well. People are very, very picky. They will very quickly say, okay, fine, we're not using your taxis. Hundreds of competitors out there. So it could work if you're a privately owned taxi company or if you're a Muslim-owned taxi company. Like in South Africa, we have a Muslim taxi company that is Muslim-owned. They've got no problem. In fact, the whole advert is written all over the taxi. I mean, the taxi is like dawah. It tells you how to become a Muslim. Every time you see the taxi, you call the taxi. I won't say the name of the company because South Africa will say, well, why don't you advertise us? So this taxi company is quite well known, but it has a very well-known Muslim name that will straight away click with people. And they do play CDs and things like that. It's not a problem. Like bus services, things like that, not a problem to do. Some of the youngsters get very enthusiastic. Some of the youngsters get very like, okay, now we've got an opportunity. This is a good idea. Let's use this way of propagating. So what they do is they make themselves a nice little CD or a flash drive and they put it in their cars. No Muslim youngsters, like if it's 120 kilometers an hour you're allowed to drive, they want to drive 300 kilometers an hour. So they put this flash drive or the CD in and they open their windows and they blast it. So everybody in the whole country can hear it. But it's bad nasheeds. These nasheeds by these crazy, it may as well just be like a rock and roll band. And they play these nasheeds and they think that's dawah because they're sitting there going, hey, I'm getting the message. Hey, I'm giving the message. And they're like bopping to it. And all these people are looking at them going, crazy Muslims. So you got to be careful, guys. Like, that's what I'm saying to you. Got your like cap to the side and sitting there with one arm out the window. I'm giving dawah. That's not dawah. Okay. That's just you finding an excuse to play loud music and act cool. So when we're talking about dawah like that, please just use a little bit of a common sense. Like, I'll be honest with you. I play a CD in my car, which has like lectures and talks. And most of these lectures are very like, I don't have like today we're going to tell you about Islam. I don't have any of those lectures. I like those scholars that wake you up when they talk, must challenge you. So I must admit, sometimes when I get to a stop street or traffic lights or whatever, I tend to turn it up just a little bit when the cars are next to me so the guy can hear like one or two lines. I do that, but I'm not going to go to the other extreme and like turn nasheeds into like supposedly dawah. We got some good nasheed artists in the world. We need to support those ones that are not compromising. There are a lot that are not, some that are. Okay, so in my country there is this very tall building, and at the top of the building there is this mosque. About the 27th floor or whatever, there's this big mosque. One of the brothers is involved in dawah and comparative teaching, has its organization there. And every now and then they invite me to come and do like a Friday lecture, the mosque. But whenever I talk, they forget to switch the intercom system off. So the entire building has to hear the lecture. So there's no choice. They leave it on by mistake. And because no one can come and tell them to switch it off, the whole building has to listen to it. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of units have to listen to the lecture, as well as the whole city. Because in our country, you're allowed to call the adhan. There's no one stopping you doing it. So imagine the whole city, like New York City, on the top of one of the huge buildings. They have an intercom system in the building and big speakers that go over, so the whole city can hear you talk. And the one day I was doing a lecture there, now it was before the 2010 World Cup came, the Soccer World Cup. And I was saying that people cannot come to the match if they're wearing like the UK shirt, because it's got a cross on it, and you can't wear a cross. So afterwards, when I left there were people in the street coming up I didn't know that it was on. People coming up to the street and commenting to me, non-Muslims, about the lecture that I gave. Now, this is a way you could do dawah through using intercom system, but this was one that they do deliberately by mistake every time I do a talk. But that's a fantastic way, but not every country will permit that to happen. I mean, they won't care if you're in mosque or not. They will come and knock down the door, tell you to switch it off. But fortunately, he gets away with this every now and then. So there's a way of doing it like that. But then, again, you must also remember the rights of other people. So you don't want to, if the Christians did that, how would you feel? You wouldn't like it. If the Hindus were doing that, you wouldn't like it. The Buddhists were doing that, you wouldn't like it. So you must think of what other people would like. Obviously, there's, I mean, in my country, Christians driving their cars with the music loud, 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 playing it on purpose because they're trying to do it. But we don't stoop to the same level if we can. Any other ways that dawah can be? Anyone else who hasn't given us an idea? Okay, you can give us a second opinion on how to do dawah.
We can place advertisements in the newspapers, billboards, and while traveling you can give pamphlets, as well as at parkings you can put those slips.
Okay, this is important, like canvassing areas where you go out and you drop pamphlets in car windows and things. I'm not keen on doing that. I think most people, when you come to your window and you see things stuck on your windscreen, what do? You go, and you throw it off. I do. Every time I come and I see someone, I go, oh, come on, not again. Because they love putting adverts, and I think it's not a good way to do it. Unless you have thought it out very, very carefully. Like maybe if you make a small little coupon that says free coffee and cake, or free coffee and biscuits, or free coffee and cookies, or whatever. Present this to such and such a place and get a free cup of coffee and cookies for a free tour of the largest mosque in India, America, Britain, whatever. And you use it in that way. Then it's fine, because that free is, everybody likes that word free. And especially if it's got like a coupon-y type thing, then they will do that. That's fine. But don't give, did you know that there is only one way to find true salvation, like the Christians? People just throw it away. They won't read it. So have it as an invitation, or a coupon, or a get something for free thing. Then they will do that. Your first point that you brought up before that was advertisements, putting up like banners and things. When the late Sheikh Ahmadidat was still alive, he had a very, very big sign in my city. You could see it from everywhere. No matter where you were, you could see it. It said, have you read the last testament, the Holy Quran? Big, massive, bigger than the studio, the letters. Gigantic, you could see it everywhere. But unfortunately, the people who took over his organization after him let that fall away. Instead of using, that was a fantastic tool, very, very good way of propagating. So there was another organization who's a very, very good example of using the newspaper for an advert. In South Africa as well, a little small community, not a big, huge community. And it's called the Islamic Awareness Center. Very clever name to help people come to be aware of Islam. Very simple people, they're not even an organization, they're nobody. That's why I even say their name, because they're not an organization. They're not big, famous organizations. Just a couple of business people. And they put an advert in the paper. All the different businesses put their money together, and they put an advert in the paper every week. Not an advert, a little column. Something about Islam, a quarter page every week, methodically. These are good ways of doing dawah. But you must be very cautious of what content goes into it. So you don't want to be offensive, you don't want to cause trouble, you don't want to cause problems. It's dawah. It's calling people to something. So what are you going to call them to? You're going to call them to the fact that we are controversial. You're going to call them to the fact that we don't want you to eat meat. What is it? What are you calling them? Don't want us to eat pork? No, that's not what we're calling to. We're calling to Allah. So you have to use beautiful narrations that will attract them. Remember that? Honey attracts more bees than vinegar. So if we put honey and vinegar out, which one will bring the bees? Honey will bring it. So we want to use honey, not vinegar. This is dawah ilallah. So we have to continuously remind ourselves and our audience that we are calling people to Islam, to specifically surrender to Allah. So yes, you may be thinking at home, but what about this and what about that? These also, yes, they work. They 100%. Debating works. Being provocative at certain times works. But it's not relating to dawah ilallah. Dawah ilallah, we are confining ourselves to calling people to submit to Allah. And with that, we're using a different approach. So we've looked at, in this episode today, one-on-one dawah, group dawah, one-to-group dawah, one person speaking to a large group of people. We've looked at publications and writing. We've looked at social networks, the internet. Also, we should mention, we're watching television, radio, podcasts, all those type of things are all effective ways for you to use to give people the message of Allah, to call people to Allah. Well, that's all the time we have for this week, so you're going to have to join us again next week as we continue with how to be effective in calling people to submit to Allah. So for me, Areeb Islam, and those here in the audience, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.